We'll try that again. Okay, this is for the assignment that was due, that I gave out on business structures, and it was the LinkedIn Learning assignment. I handed this out in class, and I believe I also sent out an email with the PDF with the questions and the instructions. And this was setting up your small business as a legal entity, and this was the set of lectures on LinkedIn Learning by Dana Robinson, which is a nice piece explaining, the different business structures that most organizations will have available to them. So the assignment was, again, given in class, and that's before the whole coronavirus, COVID-19, and the school closing down. So this assignment is going to be something that you are going to complete and then email to me. I know I gave you some details, I believe, in the previous video and email. So if you can scan this assignment and send it to me, if you've handwritten it, that's fine. If you want to take pictures and you want to send the pictures of the assignment, that's fine. You can send that as an attachment. I'll also accept it if you want to convert the PDF over and then type it up and send me the answers that way. So, that being said, I'm going to review the questions with you just to make sure that you had a good understanding and you can go over these answers before you send it to me. If you have already sent it to me, then you have the opportunity to take a look at these answers so you can correct and resend the answers. So yeah, again, this was on LinkedIn Learning, or it used to be known as lynda.com. You can access this through the school website, the library, or you can also do it through the Columbus Metropolitan Library. You can go to their main page and then go to resources. There's a drop down menu for that, and then it'll pull up a new page and you can scroll down to where it says LinkedIn Learning or a Lynda, and if you have a library card, you can enter that information along with a passcode and access it. Or if you don't have a library card and you can't figure out how to get through CCAD, you can apply for a library card with the Metropolitan Library for free online. Then they'll give you a card number that you can use then. Okay, with that being said, we're going to run through these questions. There's 28 of them. I'm going to be very brief as we run through this because I don't want to drone on, and I want to highlight certain things, but I don't want to repeat everything that Dana said. So, question number 1. What is the name of the presenter in the Setting Up Your Business as a Legal Entity program? Of course, Dana Robinson. That was pretty much a gimme. Pretty easy. Second question, what is sole proprietorship? Why do business owners choose to be sole proprietors? And what are the disadvantages to being a sole proprietor? We covered this in class, but also in the video he talks about it. It's a business operated by one person, and there is no business structure that protects against liability. So there are advantages and disadvantages to that. A lot of people pick it because it's very easy to set up. There's no special paperwork that needs to be filed. And you can pretty much just start using your own taxpayer identification number, which is your Social Security number. No special paperwork to fill out other than maybe applying for a vendor's license or some other state or local tax forms. So, easy to set up. However, the flip side is you get all of the headaches with that. So there's advantages and disadvantages to that. All right, question 3. If a sole proprietor doesn't want to use his or her name for a business, what options does the business owner have? Well, in Ohio, it's the fictitious name. Some places call it FBN or fictitious business name. Some states will call it doing business as, or DBA. So if you see any of those designations, that's what that means. And the reason why you do something like that is if you are not going to represent the business that is you as you, then you have to put the world on notice, and there has to be some place where they can, where someone can look to find out who the real owner is and what the name and contact information is. So that's usually with the Secretary of State. Alright, if a business owner is a sole proprietor, what tool can the owner use to protect against personal liability for injuries and to protect the owner's personal assets? Okay, we talked about this in class, and he talks about this. Business insurance. I did this in the context of 3 layers of protection, and insurance is one of those layers that you can pay for to have peace of mind. The nice thing about insurance is that there's a legal department usually that will defend if the case, if the insurance company evaluates it and says it's worth defending, and also, there's money. If there is a valid claim, then it's possible for the insurance company to pay that money out, depending if the policy terms and conditions have been met. That is a condition that applies. Okay. Question 5: what is one of the reasons that business owners decide to incorporate? Well, there's lots of different reasons. Risk aversion, and protection against liability. So there's also structure and formalities. So sometimes it's nice to have that structure so that the people that you're dealing with, everybody sort of sets their expectations. Again, reduce risk and limit liability. So it puts a barrier between what the business does and what the individuals who own the business are doing. And it separates that owner from the risk. And also there's a different tax rate. Corporations are taxed at a lower rate. That works even if there's double taxation. And then people who want to invest in a business and receive a stream of income, that's passive income, passive wealth. They can invest, and then the other people can be involved in the business with their expertise and with some sweat equity. So all these different reasons why you would set up a business this way. All right. Was one of the reasons that business owners decide not to incorporate? Well, again, there's lots of different reasons. So the cost of setting up and maintaining a business, going through the formalities, having separate bank accounts, all of these different things can, in some ways, be daunting, and so a business owner may say, no, I don't want to have any of these things, I just want to keep it simple. Question 7. What are the advantages and purposes of forming a corporation? So, purpose of forming a corporation, multiple business owners, again, providing structure and limitation on liability. And I know that Dana talked about setting up corporations. The original purpose was for limitation of liability way back. So the main reason why people look at having a corporation is for limited liability. Another good reason is if you want investors, that passive investment where people don't necessarily want the liability and they want a return on their investment. And if there's a potential growth with the business, or a good return on that investment. Okay, question 8. Type of ownership does matter. Which entity structure is better suited for passive investment? Well, choices with a corporation or an LLC and sole proprietorship. Again, a lot of times what people are thinking of is liability when they're looking at these, but also for the purpose of investment. See, sole proprietorship isn't necessarily a good way to go for a whole host of reasons. For tax purposes, investing in an individual business, there's necessarily going to be any sort of advantage with that. Corporations, there's advantages with that, with the structure and with shares of ownership. And then LLCs, not so much. LLCs are a better setup for people who want to be hands-on and involved in the business. Corporations, you have shareholders, which are separate. Not to say that you can't use an LLC, but a corporation is better suited for doing that sort of passive investment. Yeah. So, passive investment as opposed to active day-to-day. All right, question 9. What are the 2 forms generally that are necessary for starting and filing an LLC? So, articles of organization and the operating agreement. Okay, next question. Oh, I already got that. Somebody the answer. That's nice. All right, what is the structure for a corporation? What people hold what positions? What is the minimum number of people that are needed to run a corporation? Owners and employees. Well, you get the shareholders, you get the board of directors, you get the management. Those are the people that are going to be involved. Minimum number is 1. So you can wear all the hats. You could be a director, you could be a shareholder, and you could be a management. Yeah, so shareholders, they hold ownership of stock in the company. Directors, they make the big decisions, like if you're going to purchase property, if you're going to borrow money, if you're going to make big capital investments, like if you're going to buy equipment or purchase large inventories or sign contracts that are going to be of a significant value. And then management handles the day-to-day stuff, so that would be the employees, would be the officers as well. Okay. Question 11. What formalities must a corporation follow? You hear me talk about acting like a corporation. So, corporate formalities are things like setting up the bylaws, which are the rules for the corporation, and having meetings, annual shareholder meetings, so that way the shareholders get to vote on who's going to be the board of directors, and again have some say-so and control. And the board of directors has to meet. Now, sometimes that can be quarterly, sometimes that can be monthly, sometimes it can be once a year. These things have to happen even if there is only one person who's wearing all the hats. So shareholders, officers, and directors, bylaws, annual meetings, all governs the activities of the company and the management, and by doing this, it maintains a shield against liability. We talk about this thing called piercing the corporate veil. If you don't follow the formalities, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and you ignore the business structure, you treat it just as being you, then there's no reason for anybody else to pay attention to that, and they can come after you personally. Okay, question 12. How do corporations raise funds? They can get investors, so sale of stock for ownership. People will purchase equity in the business. You ask people to buy part of the company, and they get certain rights that go along with that. Yeah. So, the sale of the stock is highly regulated. And that goes for both small businesses and for large businesses. If it's traded publicly, then the Securities and Exchange Commission controls, and there's all sorts of rules and regulations that go along with that. And to qualify, there's all sorts of special rules that need to be followed for that. Small businesses, those either to qualify as like an S corporation, there have to be certain things that you comply with in order to get that designation from the IRS. So there are rules that need to be followed in order to get investors. Yeah. Also, within the business itself, that's going to designate how shares of stock are allocated and different classes of stock. So you would look also to the shareholder agreements in addition to the regulations as to what rules will apply. Okay, question 13. What is a closed corporation and what are the requirements to qualify as a closed corporation? So it's a small business. You have few individuals. You don't necessarily have to follow all of the traditional corporate formalities and have all these different people involved. Typically, you're going to have a limited number of shareholders, 35 or less. It's not going to be publicly traded, and the shareholders all have to agree that this is going to be set up as a closed corporation. Now, in addition to that, with a closed corporation, you can make an election to the IRS to have that S corporation designation, and that way you only have taxation one time instead of double taxation. Okay, question 14. What are the three types of business arrangements in addition to corporations? Well, I put 3 in this question because you could list off 3. There's more than that. So you got partnerships and limited partnerships, associations, co-ops, PBCs, nonprofits, and LLCs. And yeah, these are the different slides. So you see partnerships and then all the other legal entities that Dana talked about. All right, question 15. What business structure is used for most family-owned businesses, and why is that the preferred business structure? Okay, and I have up there flexible in structure and ownership. LLCs, because you can, with the operating agreement, you have more control over the allocation of the rights and ownership and liabilities, and so one member. Members are the owners. One member can take all of the tax losses and use that personally, or one member could allocate all of the profits. It's also a good way for family planning, for transfer of assets, and that can be set up over time where ownership and ownership in the business itself and assets can be transferred over to children. So, all right. Question 16. What is the difference between the flexibility of tax allocation allowed for a corporation structure versus an LLC structure? So, LLC is more flexible in how gains and losses can be allocated amongst the owners, which again are the members. Corporations allocated according to shares of ownership. So if you own a share of stock, or if you own 2 shares of stock, it has a certain value to it. And so that allocation of profit and loss is governed by that. If it's an LLC, then ownership, you can allocate, even though you own 50% of the company, you could get 100% of the losses and use that for tax purposes. Question 17. What is the process generally for starting a business as a corporation? Who are angel investors and what are venture capital firms? So these are types of investors. So typically for a business, you're going to have founders that are going to set the business up. They're going to put their sweat equity, their ideas and intellectual property into that, and then there's going to be the shares of stock, because in exchange for that value that they bring, the investment that they make into the business, then they're going to get some of the ownership or all of the ownership of the business, depending. So The stock can then be sold off to third-party investors, and angel investors are that's a term that's given for people who will invest at the startup of a company. And then you also have venture capital firms, companies that specialize in investing funds in other companies. All right, question 18. Where should business paperwork be filed in order to form a corporation? In the state that the founder lives or in Delaware? So, oops. Let me see if I can get that back. There we go. So, usually the answer is if it's the business that you're going to be owning and running, then you want it in your home state. There's not that much difference for small businesses in incorporating in different states, and if you're doing it where you live, then you'll be able to hire people locally that'll be able to help you with that state's law. And if you're going to look for funding, like angel investors or venture capitalists, at that point you may want to think about setting up in Nevada or Delaware. Okay, question 19. What steps must be taken to form a corporation? What formalities must happen for a corporation to be officially recognized publicly and legally? You're going to be filing paperwork. So, you file articles of incorporation, and then you also go through the process of appointing directors. Then, after that, the directors issue shares of stock, and the directors meet to ratify the minutes. So, again, you're going to have founders that are going to be involved in the initial setup of the business. People can be founders, and they can be owners, and they can be directors, and they can be shareholders. Well, it's shareholders or owners, all at the same time. Okay, so you file articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State. You appoint directors. You adopt bylaws, which again are the rules, and then you issue shares of stock for ownership, and then you'll have a meeting where you'll officially go over all of the paperwork, and you'll ratify the paperwork and the minutes, and then the directors will serve for the following year. Okay, question 20. In order to maintain the corporation as a separate entity, what formalities must be followed? Well, you've got to do at the very least the basics. You have to keep it as a separate entity from the individual or individuals. So, you're going to hold meetings. And at the very least, you're going to have annual shareholder meetings. You may have quarterly meetings, which is once every 3 months, or once a month, where you'll have these meetings with the board. And then they'll take minutes, which documents what what is discussed at the meeting, and other things that you want to think about is having separate finances. Formalities with this are important. Again, it's a separate entity, even if there's only one owner, one officer, one director. You want to keep separate finances. You don't want to put the money directly into your pocket, so you have a separate bank account. You'll hold annual meetings, and you'll keep minutes and records to document what the business is doing. All right, question 21. What steps must be taken to form a limited liability or a limited liability company or an LLC? And what formalities must happen for a corporation to be officially recognized publicly and legally? So, similar, you're going to file articles of organization with the Secretary of State. That is the basic paperwork that brings the LLC into being. And their filing fees are going to go along with that. And the members have to also put together an operating agreement. The operating agreement is like bylaws for a corporation. Operating agreement is the rules that the LLC and its members must follow. So, again, you got to keep separate finances, so a separate bank account, so that the way it's not treated as individual. And yeah. So far as the paperwork is concerned, follow the process. Make sure that the name that you choose, and this goes for corporations as well as for LLCs or any other business organization or fictitious name or that you're going to use. Check with the Secretary of State. Make sure that it is available. You can't have a conflict of interest where the name has already been taken. Okay. Question 22. When setting up a business entity, how does someone check to see if a particular name or particular names are available? So again, no conflict of interest. And Dana actually did this search for the name for factual data, and he walked you through some of that. Every Secretary of State has a website now where you can do name searches. And there you can see if the name is available. Alright. Question 23. What are the corporate bylaws? Who creates the bylaws? What details are included with the bylaws? Bylaws are the rules for the company. So that's the basics on that. So who can own shares and what rights go along with that? Who's in charge and what authority? So the president, and do you have a vice president, a treasurer, a secretary, what other officers? Are there directors? How many directors? Winding up and dissolution. So if you were going to close out the business, what happens with the assets? What happens with the shares? What happens with the debts? Meetings and minutes. So, when are meetings held, and how are they documented? All of these different things go into the bylaws. Question 24. What are the articles of organization for a limited liability company? And can the articles be customized for the LLC? Well, yes, they can. It's documentation that is filed with the government. That's what the articles of organization is. And then the operating agreement that's a set of rules that control how the LLC runs. And that's the more flexible part. That's where you can tailor how the business is owned, and what the members' rights are, and how taxes can be allocated. Alright, question number 25. What are the tax filings that you need to take care of with the IRS? Well, application for a taxpayer identification number, the TIN, and also if you're going to elect to become an S corporation. That works, oddly enough, for corporations. You can also take that election with LLCs. Okay. What is the difference between an S corporation and a C corporation, and what is double taxation? These are the slides. Essentially, it is a tax designation. Dana goes on with this, saying a corporation is a corporation, so the structure of it, meaning the directors and the officers and the shareholders, the types of shares, all of that is, the basics of that are still going to stay intact. The S corporation is where you've got a closed corporation, a small corporation, and you're applying for a special status with the IRS. So you actually will file the paperwork with the state first, and then you're going to make an application for the taxpayer identification number, and then after that you're going to file with the state and also with the IRS. And double taxation is where they're going to pay twice on profits. So if the corporation makes a profit, then there's tax on that profit. It's at a reduced tax rate. And then again, when there's a distribution to the shareholders, then profits on that are also taxed. So that's why they say it's double taxation. Question 27. Other than federal filings for taxes, what additional filings should a business be aware of and why? You're going to be looking to state and local taxes. So sales tax, vendor's licenses, special business licenses, use tax. So again, you're looking to state and local taxes. All right, that gets us to our last question. What are the additional resources that are suggested by the author, by Dana, to get assistance? And he talks about the SBA. I think that's great. Local Chamber of Commerce, they can be good and bad, but it's worth looking into. And he also talks about meetups. I'm going to say generally it's networking. So meetups are a way, it's a more current way of doing networking. Rotary clubs, that used to be a way of doing it, getting out and getting out into the community. So yeah, and there are other ways to network as well. So okay, those are the questions. So we've reviewed those. Again, what I want you to do is you're going to email that to me and do it as an attachment, your answers, in a format that I'm able to read and that I'm able to grade. So that's it.